Good morning. How great is it that we welcome back Reverend Peter House this morning after a long winter? Peter is a special education teacher and a summer minister at the First Unitarian Church of Rochester. Seeing Peter here, he's definitely a part of UUEA. It's always uplifting for us, but this time of year, he's also a welcome harbinger of spring. Reverend Peter, thanks for making it in from Rochester. It's wonderful to see you. This is our last week working with the Soul Matters theme of vulnerability, and Reverend Peter's sermon is about making peace with who we truly are. I'm Mary Moglia-Cannon, today's service leader, stepping in for Sue Maram. Sue, if you're on Zoom, we miss you. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm joined by Jenny Mombrea on piano, Andrew Wills on AV, and Louis Mezinet and Carly Whitney for our kids program. Welcome members, friends, and visitors to UU of East Aurora. We are a community which believes our differences make us better, a place where all are welcomed, regardless of belief systems, ethnicities, race, gender, sexual orientation, neurodiversity, or economic standing. We are in a safe space. Now, please stand in body or spirit and say hi to a person near you. Even if you've already chatted before settling in, just take a moment to say a quick hello to someone else. I have one announcement about next week. It is Stewardship Sunday. We will have a fun skit written by Jeanette Geckler, and there will be a catered lunch with vegan and gluten-free options. And I believe, Val, you have an announcement as well. Come on up, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Val Davis, and I am hosting a CPR training on May 6th. We can take up to 16 people because we only have 8 dummies, and it's going to be right here in the church, May 6th, between 9 o'clock and noon, and it is the certification course, and it's being taught by Debbie Camp, who's a pediatric nurse. Everybody should know this. My daughter-in-law is an RN at the surgical ICU at Buffalo General, and she told me that she's had several patients there, and the only reason they're alive is because of who they were with when they arrested. So the cost is $20 for the certification, and you can either talk to me afterwards or also will be in the newsletter, correct?
Yes.
Thanks.
Anybody else have announcements? I begin this service by acknowledging that our nation was largely built on the ancestral land of Native nations and the labor of enslaved peoples. May we persevere to achieve a clear understanding of our shared past and utilize these lessons learned for good and for progress. Jenny will play our prelude, The March of the Women, music by Ethel Smith and lyrics by Cicely Hamilton.
We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we have together. Are we a people of holding or of letting go? Holding on to rigid ideas, letting go and opening our minds and our hearts to something new? Holding on to certainty of how things should be, or letting go and living with the uncertainty of new ways of being in the world. Holding on to what makes us comfortable or letting go so that we may grow, which can be uncomfortable. Holding on to what makes us safe or letting go to make room to help others feel safe. With this flame, this symbol of our religion, let it be a symbol of burning up the ties that hold us back from being our true selves and reaching our true potential. Let it be a symbol of lighting a new way for us into a better tomorrow. And let it be a symbol of letting go, because holding on too long and too tightly is never good for the soul. And now let's sing together our opening hymn, number 347, Gather the Spirit. Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour, our trials this night appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind. Seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit, growing in awe, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Everything that this congregation is, everything that it has, and everything that it accomplishes happens because of the gifts that we each bring. We bring our time, our talent, our love, our energy, our passion, and our financial support. The offering will now be taken and gratefully received. If you are inclined to give after the service, there is a plate on the bookshelf, or you may do so online at uuea.org.
Welcome to Learn Conmigo 1, 2, 3. Today we will read When Aiden Became a Brother. Written by Kyle Lukoff. Illustrated by Kailani Juanita. When Aiden was born, everyone thought he was a girl. His parents gave him a pretty name. His room looked like a girl's room, and he wore clothes that other girls liked wearing. But as Aiden got bigger, he hated the sound of his name. He felt like his room belonged to someone else, and he always ripped or stained his clothes accidentally on purpose. Everyone thought he was just a different kind of girl. Some girls had rooms full of science experiments and bug collections. Lots of girls didn't wear dresses. But Aiden didn't feel like any kind of girl. He was really another kind of boy. It was hard to tell his parents what he knew about himself, but it was even harder not to. It took everyone some time to adjust, and they learned a lot from other families with transgender kids like him. Aiden explored different ways of being a boy. He tried out lots of names until one stuck. They changed his bedroom into a place where he belonged. He also took much better care of his new clothes. Then one day, Mom and Dad had something to tell him. "I'm going to have a baby," Mom announced. "A baby?" Aiden said. "Does that mean I get to be the big brother?" "Of course," said Dad, ruffling his hair. Aiden thought that being a big brother was an important job for a boy like him. He wanted to make sure this baby would feel understood right away. The baby needed clothes, so Aiden and his mom went shopping. There were so many choices. Would the baby like seahorses or penguins better? "Are you having a boy or a girl?" asked a lady. Aiden didn't like it when people asked if he was a boy or a girl, and he hoped the baby couldn't hear yet. He was glad when Mom just smiled and said, "I'm having a baby." The baby's room needed to be painted, so Aiden and his dad went to the hardware store. Dad chose a gallon of sky blue paint, and Aiden added a fluffy cloud white. "Are you excited for your new brother or sister?" asked the paint guy. "I'm excited to be a big brother," Aiden said. The paint guy looked confused. Aiden could tell that he wanted to ask a different question and was glad to have his dad there. The big rollers were fun to paint with. "This room feels just like being outside," Aiden exclaimed. He had always felt trapped in his bedroom before they fixed it, but his new sibling wouldn't have to feel that way. "You're right," said Dad. "Let's make some shapes in the clouds." Every baby needs a name. Aiden loved getting to choose his own, but he remembered that it had been hard for his parents to let go of the name they gave him. He looked for names that could fit this new person no matter who they grew up to be. Babies need someone to read to them, so Aiden practiced and practiced and practiced. Dad wanted to teach Aiden how to change diapers. Maybe later," said Aiden. He decided that picking flowers for his mom was more important. 2 weeks before the baby's due date, Aiden started to worry. Maybe he should have picked different clothes. The blue walls might be too bright. He wished he could ask the baby which name they liked best. Mom came to tuck him in. "Are you feeling okay, sweetie?" she asked. Aiden put his hands over where he thought the baby's ears would be. "Do you think the baby will be happy with everything?" he whispered. "I don't want them to feel like I did when I was little. But what if I get everything wrong? What if I don't know how to be a good big brother?" Mom hugged him tight. "When you were born, we didn't know you were going to be our son. We made some mistakes, but you helped us fix them. And you taught us how important it is to love someone for exactly who they are. This baby is so lucky to have you, and so are we." The next morning, Aiden found the boxes of his old baby pictures. He looked so different back then. It hadn't been easy, but he liked the boy he was growing into. Maybe everything wouldn't be perfect for this baby. Maybe he would have to fix mistakes he didn't even know he was making. And maybe that was okay. Aiden knew how to love someone, and that was the most important part of being a brother.
So it is really nice to be here. It feels like it's been a long time. And it's sunny out. So back around 1991, my friends Mike and Fred bought their first house. It was an old house, and the woman who owned it had lived there about 60 years. She had gone into a nursing home, and the relatives were selling the house to help pay for the nursing home. So the house was everything that you would probably picture based on the information that I've given you so far. It was frozen in about 1947, with flowered wallpaper in every room, a clawfoot tub in the bathroom with no shower, and a gas stove in the kitchen, one of those that's old enough that it actually stood on 4 graceful-looking legs, and it had one of those warming ovens on the top that had a door on it like a roll-top desk. Sadly about that, the engineer said that it was a fire hazard, so that had to go. The family had left behind several pieces of furniture, all of which looked like they belonged on the set of It's a Wonderful Life. Vintage 1930s and 40s pieces. Much of it Mike and Fred kept, but I fell in love with a little chair, and they said that I could have it. It was the kind of chair that probably hasn't been made for 70 years or more. A very small but fully upholstered armchair. I think its original purpose had been to place in front of a dressing table. Remember when people had dressing tables? Or maybe one that was you put next to the side of your bed for putting your stockings on and off. But it was definitely designed for a bedroom. And like the wallpaper, it was upholstered in a dated but cheerful floral print. And most charmingly, over that was a pink custom-made slipcover, which had a different but equally dated yet cheerful floral motif, if you can kind of picture what those floral motifs of the 40s looked like. The chair, when they found it, was fittingly enough in the master bedroom, and it was given to me as a thank you for my help with their moving. It was well worn, but it was still functional. And it was definitely me, as they say. Anyone who has ever been to my house can tell you that I love old furniture. In fact, there's hardly a stick of furniture in my house that was made after World War II. I didn't mind the worn look of the upholstery at all. It would go perfectly in the shabby old starter home that my former partner and I had just bought the year before. But I wanted this chair for another reason as well. Ever since my friend Jim, this actually happened when I lived in Buffalo on the west side, ever since my friend Jim had reupholstered an old chair that I had given him a few years earlier and done a beautiful job on it, I had been dying to take an adult education class in upholstery so that I too could have chairs like the one Jim had. This chair, this particular chair that I was being given, was perfect for this purpose. Because for this particular class that I wanted to take, you needed to be able to bring your chair back and forth every week. You couldn't leave it at the site. And this chair was light enough for me to carry by myself. It was small enough to fit into the back of my Honda Civic. And yet it was fully upholstered. Even the arms were upholstered so that I could learn all of the skills that I needed to learn so that I too, like my friend Jim, could transform any random curb find into a treasured heirloom. I brought the chair home and I placed it in our spare bedroom. And there it lived for the next 11 years. Every fall when the BOCES adult education catalog came in the mail, I'd briefly consider signing up for the upholstery class. But there was just always some reason why I didn't. It would be on Thursdays when I had my choir rehearsal, or on another night which conflicted with one of the graduate classes I was perpetually taking at that time. Or it would be a semester that I was too busy due to these graduate classes and I wouldn't have any time for it. Or we wouldn't have the extra money that year, or I'd just be feeling burned out. As Rosanna Dana was always reminding us in the 70s, it was always something. If it wasn't one thing, it was another. And so it went on through the early 90s, the mid 90s, and then the late 90s when I went to Chicago for seminary. That chair was still sitting in the same place in the early 2000s when I returned to Rochester to live full time. In 2002, my former partner and I bought a new house in the suburbs. Still intending to take that upholstery class, I moved the chair to the attic of the new house, where it lived among a growing collection of items that I would use definitely someday. When he and I separated in 2005, I lugged it with me to yet another house, tucking it into yet another attic. Who knew? Maybe now, as a newly single person, that upholstery class I've always wanted to take might be just the thing I needed as a diversion, as a purpose. And that chair, smartly upholstered, might be a declaration of my new independence. Proof that, like Mary Richards, I was still going to make it after all. But as people who have been through this experience might be able to relate to, like so many newly single people, I was lonely and vulnerable, and I found myself gravitating more to comforts than to challenges. And so the chair continued to sit in the new attic. When Michael and I bought our current house, it had the biggest attic I had ever had. Certainly, there was room for my chair. Why, that upholstery class might be just the thing when I retire. And when I finally do get around to taking that class, I will be so thankful that I lugged that chair all over Monroe County for 47 years. But there was something else going on during those 3 decades that I didn't connect at all at the time with the chair. I had been learning about myself. I had discovered that I couldn't change the ink cartridge in our printer, even after watching a YouTube video and having a friend talk me through it over the phone. I'm embarrassed to admit I had been a complete and utter failure in a neighborhood knitting class. So bad, in fact, that about the 4th week of class, the teacher advised me to choose another pastime. I'll never forget it. She said, "I've been teaching knitting for over 20 years, and even I can't figure out what you're doing wrong." And I discovered that I'm completely incapable of driving a nail straight into a real plaster wall. Michael has to do the nail for me whenever I hang a picture. It just bends. It won't go in. I don't know why. I've had to accept that I am not good with my hands. And most importantly, and this is really important, I am not motivated to anywhere near the degree I would need to be to truly overcome this deficit. In March of 2020, when we were isolated in our house like everyone else, Michael and I, like so many of us probably here this morning, decided it was a great time to sort and simplify our home, getting rid of the countless items that we'd been hauling and storing and dusting for years and years and years, all with the intention of using them in that elusive someday. We discarded that tent that just needed a small patch to be good as new because we finally realized that we've only gone camping once in 17 years. We got rid of those strings and strings and strings of Christmas lights that just needed to be reworked. And we finally got rid of a very huge and heavy box of math education workbooks and dittos. Remember dittos? That had been given to me by one of my colleagues who retired in 1989. And then, going through all of this stuff in the attic, we got to the chair that I was saving for retirement, when not only would I finally have the time for the upholstery class I'd wanted to take since 1987, but also when magically skills that I have never had any aptitude for will finally and inexplicably be attainable, and personality traits which have dogged me throughout 6 decades, several careers, and 2 marriages will finally and miraculously just get out of my way. So I looked at the chair. I spent some time looking at it and thinking about it. still with its dated but pretty slipcover, sitting where I had placed it when I moved in 2007, in the corner of the attic under the eaves, the chair that I had lugged from Mike and Fred's house to Bremen Street, to Winona Boulevard, to South Washington Street, and finally to Laburnum Crescent. And I realized that this chair represented what I had hoped I was, or naively thought I could become 30 years ago. And the fact that I still had never taken that upholstery class was about a lot more than simple procrastination. I had never done it because I didn't really want to do it. And I didn't really want to do it because I really didn't have the aptitude or the skills or the interest I would need to overcome all of the obstacles that I've already described to you. You see, wanting a nicely upholstered chair to sit in and look at is a wholly different thing than wanting or being able to do the actual upholstering myself. I realized as I looked at that chair, forlornly sitting under the eaves by the strings of broken Christmas lights, that it was long past time to make complete peace with the person who couldn't change the ink cartridge on the printer, needed Michael to hang pictures for me, and had such a dismal aptitude for knitting that an experienced teacher couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And in order to make that peace, I needed to do a lot of letting go, and a measure of grieving too. Because the chair represented a lot more to me than a naive and unrealistic aspiration. It was a symbol of all of the peacemaking that we must do as we age. We have to make peace and reconcile with all which never was, and most likely probably never could have been. It's different for everyone, be it children we never had, careers that never took off, romances that didn't stand the test of time. I think it's safe to say that the longer we live, the more we have to reconcile. Few, if any of us, live the lives we thought that we were going to have when we were 21. Every single heart carries regret and disappointment and grief. But the question that I have for everyone this morning is, how much of this long ago imagined but never realized person still lives somewhere inside of us? And how much does this never-to-be person still influence and drive the choices and decisions we still make today? I have come to believe that the degree of contentment that we find is in direct correlation to how much we're able to do that. And satisfaction that we get, whatever it is that we get from our lives, depends on how much we're able to let go of who we thought we were and make peace with who we actually are, shortcomings and all. My friend Mark often serves, I'm glad he doesn't watch the Zoom, but he often serves as an example for me of how holding on to who you thought you were gets in the way of making peace with who you actually are. Mark is brilliant, definitely one of the smartest people I know. And unlike me, he is extremely good with his hands. He could build a house, restore an antique car, or take a cell phone apart and figure out what's wrong with it and successfully put it back together so that it would work. He has a quick mind and a knowledge base which seems to me to be limitless. He is also, by anyone's definition, a hoarder. And the hoarding all serves the same purpose, holding on to the whims and fancies of his youth. He has, and I'm not kidding, an entire room full of old computers that he is someday going to restore. He has a basement full of scavenged mahogany for the house that he plans to build someday. And he parks outside in the driveway because his garage contains the bodies of 2 classic cars that he believes he will someday restore. I recall the day that he got the first car body, a 1958 Chevy. I was a freshman in college at the time. Like my chair, this car body has moved with Mark several times. For a time, he had to rent space to house it because he was living in a tiny apartment and there wasn't anywhere to keep it. He chose the house that he owns now because it had a 2-car garage so that he could put that car body in one bay and a 1954 Ford truck shell that he acquired about 1988 in the other bay. By his own admission, he has never even touched either one of them. But again, like me and like my chair, he just knows that he will get to that project when he retires. In the meantime, Mark's house needs a lot of work, but the specter of someday always gets in the way of any of it actually happening. About 5 years ago, I think it's been a little more than that actually, Mark complained to me that he had to eat out all the time. When I asked him why, he said, because the kitchen sink no longer works. Now, as I've explained, Mark has all of the skill that I lack. I have seen him fix other people's plumbing and my own, by the way, more times than I can count. So why, I asked him, why don't you fix the sink? Because, he answered emphatically, that sink is from the 1950s. I'd have to use the wrong size pipe to fix it. They used 1 1/4 inch pipe in those days, and now they use 1 1/2 inch pipes. You know I'm going to remodel that whole kitchen someday. If I put in 1 1/4 inch pipe, I'd have to replace it with 1 1/2 inch pipe when I put in the new sink. It would be a waste of time, not to mention a waste of money. I wish I were kidding. But I've known Mark a very long time now, and I knew that pointing out that he'd owned the house since 1989 and hadn't, to my knowledge, so much as painted a wall up until now, let alone tackle anything anywhere near as ambitious as a complete kitchen remodel, would be a waste of time. Nor would it help to call any attention to the amount of money that he was wasting really, by eating all of his meals out. Mark, I think perhaps more than anyone else I know, is wholly driven still to this day in his late 60s by who he thought he was and what he thought he'd accomplish in 1975. The mere contemplation of making peace with who he has actually become, I think, feels like a kind of death to him. And I believe there's some truth in that for all of us. Holding on to our idealized selves is kind of one of the many ways that we stave off death. As long as that chair is tucked away, awaiting its never-to-happen reupholstering, or that 1958 Chevy restoration beckons, or as long as that sink remains perpetually out of order in the service of the dream kitchen to be, death can't claim us. Because it's not the person we actually are, after all, that death is coming for. It's that person we never were, that someday in the far off, way distant future, after all of these things have finally been accomplished and all of these dreams have been realized, that's the person who will eventually die. Making peace with who we have become and letting go once and forever of the never-to-be person we thought or hoped we'd become feels to many of us like the ultimate capitulation. Is there a trade-off, though? Is there an upside to this letting go that I'm advocating? Any reward for giving up on that highly unlikely person that will never be? One of my inspirations for becoming a special ed teacher was the book Karen by Marie Khalili. I just happened across this book one day when I was about in 5th grade in the library, but it had a profound influence on my future career. Karen was born 3 months prematurely at a time when such babies rarely survived. It was 1941, I believe. And as a result of her prematurity, she developed cerebral palsy. After she was diagnosed, Karen's parents decided to raise her at home, contrary to the advice of many, many doctors who said, commit her to an asylum, as they said in those days, and forget about her. One doctor even said to them, I remember from the book, what they do in China with such children is they take them to the top of a mountain and leave them. So after visiting 23 doctors, they finally found one who taught them to do physical therapy with Karen at home, which was then a very radical concept. And they did so, spending 2 hours a day on her therapy for the next 10 years. I remember the mother talking about how they shaved their hours of sleep down to 5 hours a night so that they would have time to do all this physical therapy. And as a result of all of that incredible effort, Karen did learn to walk with crutches. She could write, she could swim, and she could use her arms and legs. Yet, the ability to walk came at a very high price. In order to maintain the muscle tone that she needed to walk with crutches, Karen had to spend an inordinate amount of time each and every single day on painful physical therapy exercises. She had to endure regular surgeries, which were also painful, and she had to sleep uncomfortably every night with these heavy braces that kept her legs stretched out sufficiently so that they wouldn't curl up in the night. And the older she got, the more painful and more debilitating this effort to stay on crutches became. And yet, for several years, neither she nor her parents even questioned whether or not all of this pain and effort was worth the reward. When Karen was only an infant, they had set their sights on this goal. All of their efforts for over 10 years had been in the service of this goal, that she would walk. To Karen and her parents, the ability to walk, even if it was only on crutches, represented to them the ultimate triumph over the incredible adversity that they had endured. It became important in and of itself, almost separate from any function or any purpose. It served the person that Karen actually was. Finally, in adolescence, facing another round of painful surgeries, Karen finally began to question whether or not walking on crutches really served her. After spending a good deal of time in introspective reflection, she came to the conclusion that she would be much happier, more comfortable, and better served by letting the walking go and accepting full-time use in a wheelchair. As it said in Karen's New York Times obituary in 2020, after Miss Khalili experienced the freedom that came with using a wheelchair and decided that she preferred that to hobbling around on crutches, which she found to be painful, her mother quoted her as saying, "No more will I be a drab, slow little sparrow that hops around with his head down. I will be free, really free. I'll be an eagle with my face to the sun." Making peace with who we are may feel like a kind of a death when we first contemplate it. And if, like my friend Mark, we keep finding reasons to hold on to what was never to be, we may take some comfort from the familiar. But we are also closing ourselves off to so much that actually is. If instead, we can open ourselves up like Karen did to the reality of who we actually are, I believe there is a great deal of freedom and joy to be had. Think of all of the things that you could let go if you got your mind around this idea that something that you thought you could do or would happen to you 30 or 40 years ago, if you could let it go. If you think about it, in some ways, every single undertaking is a disappointment in the making. Nothing ever truly lives up to the expectations that we place on it. This is true even for our very selves. It doesn't only apply to accomplishments either, like I've kind of focused on today, but it really applies to everything: relationships, careers, experiences, projects. I am starting to think that the key to happiness is to just make peace with it all. Our failures, our shortcomings, our disappointments, our tragedies. Death will come, regardless of how many unfulfilled dreams we cling to. And when it does, what will matter is not what we dreamed, but what we did. Not what we longed for, but what we cherished. Not what we wanted to be, but who we actually were. So take a minute and think, what piece of who you thought you were going to be or what you thought would happen are you still carrying in some way? Is this still serving you? And what do you have to lose by giving it up? So my attic is big, and there were actually 2 chairs up there which needed reupholstering. So you heard at length about the first one. But the second one was Michael's grandmother's, a wing-back chair, again from the 1940s. And last year, I finally brought it down from the attic too. And what I did with this one was I took it to Orlando, who is an excellent upholsterer in Shortsville, the town where I teach. And he did, I have to say, a absolutely beautiful job on it. It looks great and it's very comfortable. In fact, I wrote this sermon sitting in that chair. It cost $978 plus tax, and let me say, it was worth every penny. And now let's sing together hymn number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath. Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love. May we go forth from this place thankful for the life that sustains and renews us, and open to the grace that surrounds and constantly surprises us. May we go forth from this place with openness and with thanksgiving. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.